Welcome to the Action Shooting Show. We have another full cast tonight. It may look similar. We just did another episode, so we're getting a twofer in tonight, which is awesome. So with me, I have Mark Rebke. We have Mark Rebke. We have Tiger Schultz, and we have Mike Ford, who we lost video on because his phone is overheating. So if it cools down, maybe he'll come back. If not, you won't be able to see him blurrily working in his gun room. So I'm sure you guys are all really disappointed to miss out on that. So we are going to do an after action report. This is a match we have never shot before. So it was kind of unique. It was just me and Mike. It was a DMR team ruck match. So this happened in Marietta, Ohio at Fort Harmer Range. But again, we'd never been to this range before. It was kind of something new, and the format was a little bit different. We actually, going into it, didn't really know what we expected to expect. Said shots from 25 out to 500 yards. There's going to be some rucking legs involved, so we knew about that, but we didn't know how or what they were doing. And a series of stages. It was mostly rifle. They said you could use a pistol occasionally if you wanted, but it wasn't mandatory. And that was kind of all we went into. So we kind of expected something a little bit more like a run and gun. Just thinking maybe you're going to go stage to stage and there are some rucks between it or something. It actually ended up more like the Wolverine match that we've done 2 after action reports on. So kind of unique. And the stages, though, were really unique. So to start, flavor-wise, again, it's a team match. So we had me and Mike shooting it. There was, the flavor, it was DMR. They had stuff close range. They had long. They had at least, what do you say, Mike, 2 or 3 stages that were shots past 300 yards?
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with the amount of that intermediate to long range that they pulled off. They did a great job using the facilities that they had to do that.
Yeah, and because if you don't know, Ohio is not the mecca for long range shooting. We don't really have a lot of safe places or big stretches of land like they do out west to shoot long range. So that was kind of it. So the format of the match, actually, you showed up. They had one big stage that everyone shot, and they did 3 waves of it. I forget how many teams shot at the same time. This will kind of make sense when I explain it, but probably like 10 or 12. You started it on their 300-yard range, and downrange there was, for each team, 3 different paper targets. So all paper in this match was IDPA paper. So think like the silhouette, but instead of like a USPSA scoring zone, you had a round, maybe 10-inch A zone, and then your C zone next to that, and then D zone outside of that, which is the C and the Z. The C and the D were similar to USPSA. I believe the whole head box, though, in IDPA is considered the A zone. So that's a little bit different. Yeah. So you started 50 yards to the right. And I was just telling these guys, there's no shot timer in this match that I saw. They just basically, everyone had stopwatches. So they got 12 teams, 50 yards to the right of their positions. Well, when I explain more, it'll make sense to you. There's only one stage. Maybe I would have liked to have seen one, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. But so everyone started 50 yards to the right. Yeah. And they yelled go. You sprinted 50 yards to your start position. Each teammate were next to each other in front of a barrel, and you had to shoot 5, reload 5 at that paper target at 300 yards, and you're able to rest on a barrel. So 30 seconds to do that. Run, shoot, reload, shoot. 4 scored paper. So keep in mind, 3 points for the A zone, 2 points for the C zone, 1 point for D. You get nothing if you miss. So, sporty. I mean, to say the least, that's 300 yards is tough, and at that distance, obviously, you've got, depending on your zero, you can't just hold the center of the target.
But to put it into some perspective for people who aren't, math literate, that 10-inch circle in the middle, that A zone, is a 3.5 or 3 1/3, I guess, 3 1/3 MOA target, even at 300 yards. Like that's not a tiny target, and you have the around thing to aim with. But 10 rounds in 30 seconds after spit, including a 50-yard sprint and a reload, that's fast.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was sporty. It's not impossible, but it was sporty.
Yeah.
From there, you would reset, and then they would yell go, and you ran 50 yards forward. They had some cones out, and you went to either kneeling or seated, 5, reload 5 on a second set of targets. So you and your partner are shooting at the same target. Each of these kind of drills has a different target that you're shooting at, if that makes sense. So again, kneeling, you're somewhat supported, but at 250 yards, that is not a chip shot. You definitely have to have good fundamentals. And that's really maybe the name of the game for this whole match. After that, you sprinted forward and one more time, and you went prone. And this time it was, 10 rounds loaded in your mag, 10 rounds prone at a third sheet of paper. So ideally, the high score would be 20 rounds in each of these targets in the A zone, because each teammate's shooting 10 rounds.
Did you
that
guys
did not happen.
Go seated or kneeling?
I went seated. And Mike, what did you do?
Sorry, folks, I have to turn on the mic. So for the seated or kneeling option, I went seated. I felt like that it was worth the time penalty to get into a slightly more stable position for what was happening.
I want to retract my janky statement about the timers, because now that you've explained it was part-time stuff, makes sense. Yeah. I don't want to offend the match director. I think it makes sense now.
No. I normally
explain it to us.
normally I would say, and honestly, you could do a shot timer. With that many people shooting on that stage, just yelling stop was probably as simple as anything.
Yeah. Shooting 24 shooters at a time, like a shot timer, doesn't matter anyways.
Yeah. So it was and that was most of the almost all. I think all the paper in that match was similar. Was just, you've got X amount of time to get it done. So shoot as accurately as you can within that time period. Now, having said that, the par times I thought were, in my mind, perfect, because you had to be quick about everything. Like, this wasn't slow fire to get everything done, but it also wasn't blazing. Like, you had time to get a good sight picture if you did your thing. So we kind of got, I was on my second or third shot, and our target fell down. So when me and Mike are looking at the guys, just hang out. And he said, "Oh, you guys must have shot your clips," which could have happened. Going down there and seeing some of the other people around us targets compared to ours, though, I'm going to go out on a limb that we didn't shoot both the clips. That probably was some friendly fire from around us, because there was some we got up there and we were like, but there were some people that had very few holes on their target. So it was a sporty stage. So what they ended up doing is they just put a new target up for that third leg, and then we just ran the first two with the next group, and then we only had to shoot on that last one. So but Mike, any kind of thoughts on that stage? I really enjoyed that kind of drill. I think it's based off kind of a military drill that they do.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, but again, this match was a different format than we've done in the past. And ultimately, I think I was pleasantly surprised. We were both pretty hard on how we thought we did as an individual. But when we got down there and realized, wow, everyone's a little bit on the struggle bus. Some people are a little bit more uh, deeply involved in struggling than we were. It was like, okay, well, maybe this is the limits of our practical accuracy. And at that distance at the same time, like, hey, I shot my 55 grain bulk load, which at 100 yards has about an inch shift. So at 300 yards, hey, I might have been shifted 3 inches high, which would explain why a lot of my stuff was higher on the target. So yeah, some good little reminders of gear, ammo selection, everything that goes into play. Pile that on top of the already fairly difficult drill, and yeah, it was eye opening. I think that was definitely a really good opener, and I expect them to use that again. Part of me wishes that we had a way to incorporate something like that into our sprinter. So.
Yeah, I've actually thought about taking that. I mean, we only have 200 yards, but we could probably do something similar. One thing I did there, I don't know if this is gamers, because I had my dope card written out. I actually dialed for those for each distance, because then I could just hold center of target and every shot's the same. So but that seemed to work for me.
So I got two questions. One, or I guess a question and a comment. One, the comment first, it's a brown paper target. You can't see the aiming zone. So there is some skill regarding that. But my second question, without giving a full rundown of my DD rails and my blah, 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 what guns were you guys running? You're running both 223, or you using your medium power, were you using 16-inch? What were you guys doing?
That's a good question, because mine was so I had wanted to do my kind of Mark 12-ish 18-inch rifle. It's got a 2-12. You're thinking this is a good DMR. I did not have time to dope that out, or re-zero and check with my new rounds. So I used my 12.5. I almost every stage except for one, and this is even when we're shooting long range, I use 55 grain soft point, like my just general fodder loads, because it tends to be a little under 2 inches, inch and a half.
And then what optic on that?
The 1-8 Trijicon AccuPower. So nothing really, as far as a DMR rifle, that most people would not consider that a DMR rifle, but and then Thunder Beast can, because I'm civilized. Mike, how about you?
My boomstick for this match was my normal run and gun rifle. It was the first match that I ran this was the second match that I ran my Mars lower for. And A5 buffer system. Optic was the Razor Gen 3 1-10 with the mill Christmas tree. And the upper has a 16-inch Criterion barrel with a rifle gas, a smokes composite carbon fiber handguard with the Arca rail section on the back half of it, and a Sandman K with the 5.56 end cap. Ammo, I was shooting. Oh, and I do have a 12 o'clock top dot on top of that. And then for ammo, I'll shoot my 69 grain hand loads, which are about a MOA, maybe a little bit bigger in that gun, depending on how I'm shooting, at about 2850 for velocity. And then the bulk option was my 55 grain reloads that are just, mixed brass, head stamp, and those are about 2950 if I recall last time I chronoed those. So that was what I was shooting. No crazy secret sauce there. Really pretty standard equipment.
Yeah, and I was actually just checking. This is a problem. I need to redo these reloads. Those 55 grain are going 2680. So they're not particularly spicy. They are crawling out of that gun.
Yeah, that's rough.
And you know what? The next stage after that, we were shooting out to 500, and the guy next to me was like, shooting at the same time of us because they kind of had a stage set up. Two groups could shoot at the same time. He's like, "Oh yeah, 55 grain out of 12 fives. Those are subsonic at 400." And I'm like, "Well, I don't think so. But these do go subsonic at about 550. But out to 500, they are very accurate. I've made lots of 500-yard hits with it. So everyone finished that up. We were actually in like the last group to go through that. So
yeah. So I've got also a statement and a question. The statement is, Mark, quit being a little bitch and drinking water. The question is, so I've heard this with both Legion and then with my match where I've ran like in Heartbreak, where side by side stages happen, like other people are shooting at the same time you are. Did that affect? Like, I don't expect it to affect you guys because you shoot a lot of matches. You're used to gunfire. But do you think it affected other competitors, or do you think it affected you at all to have like other shooters going off? Because you don't usually shoot a stage with other shooters, like with gunfire going off. And like at Legion last year, we had the 50 cal sim and the 240 Bravo sims on the stage that I RO'd. And some people like really flinched every time that would go off. And you know, even if we're around guns a lot, it's not something you're used to. Like if you expect if you're shooting, other people aren't. Did that affect you guys, or do you think it affected anybody else? Maybe.
That's a good question. I'll speak for myself. It didn't really affect me. I'll kind of go and explain. We weren't like right next to each other, but I mean, I've done enough team matches and like shot next to people. I don't know that it really had any effect on me, or I don't think it affected Mike any. But let me kind of go, and that's a good question. Let me kind of go on and explain a little bit more of the match format and that kind of stage, and maybe that'll give you a better idea. Because you were a good 15, 20 feet, 15, 20 yards apart, you know. So once we finished that up, they basically said, okay, go over to where you register. So when we registered, they actually gave us a bunch of paper, like a packet of papers. So we went over there. They said, what's your team name? And we told our team number. So we told them, you know, it's team 12. And so they said, okay, the next thing you're going to do is go to this stage. And it was kind of a neat way they did it. They just had like each stage or rucks they had laid out on the table, and every team had a note card. So, you know, they said, go to this stage here. And they put our note card next to that, knowing like that's how many teams are at this area. So we went back over kind of the same field we started shooting in, and they had like a big spool barricade and then some kind of small things. They had positions laid out, and you had six targets, or is it 5 targets? Maybe 5 targets. That going from like 100 yards out to 500 yards. And you had a bunch of magazines on you, all with 7 rounds apiece. So to start off, one of your teammates had to pull a tire with a rope on it around a barrel and come back. Every time you did that, you earned 1 magazine, basically. So Mike went first, drug that around. He got into the first position, and you had to go in each position in order. And each person had to do a different position, and you couldn't repeat until you went through all of them. And you also had to use cover. This match had a cover rule. So if you were too exposed, they would yell cover. You had to get behind it. And if you didn't, you'd lose like points or whatever. So Mike pulls it, gets into position, starts shooting, and shoots the first handful of targets. While he's shooting, I'm dragging a barrel, or dragging the tire around the barrel. Now, they had these 2 positions mirrored, like I said, about 15 yards apart. And then going out, there was like big yellow plates they had white plates. So I'm shooting yellow, we're shooting yellow, they're shooting at white. So you're near each other, but like honestly, I don't know. Once I was locked into shooting, I was paying attention to me and Mike, and like gunfire anywhere else on the range really wasn't a concern of mine. So Mike goes first. Mike, do you remember how many targets you're gonna want to start going into the stage? I'm gonna see if I can find that. I think I got that notebook or the matchbook from it.
Yeah, I believe there was 7 targets, and I got you. Man, it sounds crazy, but I think you picked up the last 2.
I did. You had the
swing.
first 5. Yep. So there's our kind of matchbook. Yeah, that is right. You got the first 5 out of 7, and then there was one at, I think we were guessing about 425, and then the last one was at 500. So yeah, here we go. This is that first stage we were talking about. It's called Mad Dash. So they've got all the stages, what rounds or what the round count is. If you needed 4 magazines with 5 rounds each, 1 magazine with 10 rounds, total 30 rounds. So every stage has got a description and kind of what the loadout would be. So yeah, Mike got the first 5, and then he was done. I got up there into the second position, and I ended up getting the 425 and then the 500 within a couple shots. I ended up dialing with that and figuring out kind of where my hold was, and then I ran dry and tagged Mike in, and he actually did the same thing again. He went 1 through 5, and the second time I got up, I had the 425 and the 500, which I think I got in like 3 shots or something like that. Since I already had hit him the first time, I knew the dope for him. And then I went into target 1, target 2. The way this match worked, you went through this, see if 300-second par time, as many 7-round magazines as you can carry as it. And you just get points for every steel target you hit. And you just go through this iteration as many times as you can until that 300 seconds is off. And steel hit targets are worth 3 points apiece. So for every hit you get 3 points, which is, again, you don't need a par time. You just need a stopwatch and someone to call and count hits. So really neat stage, really kind of interesting, shooting scenario. Did you have anything to add to that, Mike, for these guys ask any questions?
Mike, you're muted.
Sorry, guys. Not my brightest shining moment there. Probably one of the weird things for me was they gave an award there for best use of cover, and pretty much everyone I saw was shooting from behind the barricade, and really, the way the barricade was set up, you were pretty well behind cover. So, it seems like kind of a maybe semi-subjective thing to try to score. So yeah, and kind of an odd thing there that we hadn't seen before. So,
yeah.
It was a really fantastic stage, though, and talking to the match director later about all the targets out there were 18 inches wide and probably about 20, maybe 22 inches tall. So, it would have been a fantastic match to run an ACOG. Because Ryan and I were able to kind of figure out distances, and I think they ended up telling, or maybe not. I can't remember the whole picture. But, a lot of the stuff was kind of an unknown distance feel. And so if you had something with an accurate BDC that matched your load that had some level of ranging ability, it probably would have been a decent match to run it.
Yeah, they told you, so you knew that the paper was 300 yards and that the max target was 500. from there, it was, and it was kind of neat the way it works. They're kind of in a valley. And so the first couple targets are kind of low, but then as they go up, they're actually like going further, they're going up a hill. So like that 500-yard target is probably at a good, I don't know, 15, 20 degree or more angle up, maybe. I mean, it's decently up the hill. You're not just shooting on a flat line. So, that makes for interesting kind of target presentations. So you guys got any questions on this before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, one, Tiger's setting you up. All these people watch this stuff and they always ask in the forums, how can I practice when I only have access to an indoor range? This is exactly what you're looking for, right? You having a whole bunch of people shooting right next to you? He's trying to give you that. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is nothing like trying to zero a pistol in an indoor range when some guy's got a AR-15 at 25 yards in the bay right next to you, just pummeling your soul.
300 win mag for the win.
Yeah.
So you got to hard yourself is what you're trying to say. That's where we're getting at. You're already real hard, and other people need to get to those public ranges, and they'll be ready for these kind of matches. That's what we're looking for here, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So we finished that up, and we went back to the checkpoint. And Mike may remember for sure. Did we do our first ruck right after that, Mike? Or did we shoot one more stage?
I think we did our first ruck. They sent us out on the picture hunt.
Yeah. So yeah.
Just quick, just to get my mind wrapped around this. Not everybody did the stages and the rucks and all of that in the same order.
No. So I don't know if you were, they basically, that checkpoint, I think this is a really smart way to do this. That checkpoint, they basically had a bunch of paper down that was like each stage and ruck. Each team had a little card that they would keep track of that they would move you. So they just look down on the table to say, okay, so early on, you haven't done anything. Okay, go here. And then once you're done with that, they check that off. And okay, now you're going to do this ruck. Check it off. And then they can just at any point look down on the table and see how many teams are at this stage, at this stage, at this stage. That'd be, the Wolverine is kind of a similar format. They have one big ruck land nav part. But then you're scrambling around. Oh, is this bay? There's not many people shooting here. This bay, waiting in line. This way, I think they really kept the waiting down to a minimum. And really, I think there was only one, maybe two stages we had to wait very long, and that was only one other group in front of us to go. So I thought it was a real efficient way to get people kind of around and through the match efficiently, because I think we were done shooting by like 1:30 or 2 for an 8 o'clock start time.
Do you feel like that may have affected, and this is the match director coming out, I mean, sorry about that, competitive equity at all, to have some people having done rucks prior to certain stages? Or do you feel like it was all, since it was pretty well randomized, right? Like, I mean, it's not like they were trying to.
Yeah, I mean, it could. It absolutely could. And, they even gave you a little bit of option, because they'd be like, well, you want to do a stage or a ruck? Well, we want to do a stage right now. We tried to do what we could to push our last ruck as far into the match as we could. Just if there was an option. But again, if they were like, hey, go on your ruck. Okay, we're going to go on a ruck. We're not going to try to argue or, talk to something. Like, when we go, we go. But yeah, there is some random ability or random, if you did a hard ruck right before like a real hard stage, yeah, that may suck a little bit, but that's the nature of the game. I mean, that's why we try to prepare for this stuff. So yeah, that's a good point.
It was kind of unique even though they were assigning you, hey, you're going to go ruck. Well, if they sent you on a ruck, they started, they noted what time you left and what time you got back. But after that, before you went to the next shooting stage or after the next shooting stage, before you checked back in, you could go to your car, you could have a sandwich, you could grab a, cold drink or, whatever you needed to. Now they promote that you have everything you need for you on your body when you're in the competitive class. Which, I mean, Ryan and I were rucking around with water and all the ammo that we needed and stuff to complete that day. But it was very easy for us to be like, hey, let's swing by and grab a swig of Gatorade and, break out one of his Lunchables and share it, while we kind of talk about how we did, where we think we're doing, little takeaways that might help us for the next stage, and then keep rolling. So that it was nice that, unlike Wolverine, where it's chaos and you're trying to understand what's happening and why are these stages backed up and things like that, it was more, hey, I can focus on my shooting, I can focus on my rucking, my hydration and food, and not be sucked into the chaos as much. So, and I understand, I think Wolverine might kind of pride themselves on the chaos factor. But at the same time, I definitely think that this style of administration cut out a lot of headaches, and everyone got to experience all the stages. And yeah, so in like dealing with summer and the possibility of heat casualties and things like that, the way they broke that down worked out really well. So tip of the hat to MD on that. So,
Yep.
yeah, you
Yeah.
could say that maybe that it could affect the competitive equity, but at the same time, it was randomized, and the teams could drive themselves as hard as they individually wanted to. And
Yeah, like
because of that, it worked out pretty well.
yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but I just didn't know if that was the case or if it seemed
I would say not any worse than like a running gun. If you run in the morning, you got a different match than the afternoon. 3-gun,
right.
you're shooting
Absolutely.
this bay at the AM and the sun's in your eyes, and the PM they don't get it. So I don't think any more or less than the randomness of any other match outside.
Yeah,
so,
which is perfect. Like that's the way it should be.
Yeah. So your loadout is like a liter of water. They wanted 5 magazines on you. The match director said afterwards they could be even empty, but 5 magazines, your slung rifle. I'd have to reload the rules, but they kind of want the standard patrol loadout, basically. Part of this, a lot of these stages had requirements for like what magazines you had. So like we would finish a ruck, they'd tell us what stage to go to next, and then like on the way there, we would stop by the car, grab a quick bite to eat or drink, download mags, load up whatever we needed, and head to the next stage. So that's kind of what Mike's talking about. There was a little bit of that downtime between it to like get reset for the next stage. So in this case, that first ruck, they said they were all around a mile. I think we didn't really measure them. I think one Mike measured it like 0.88 of a mile or something like that. But you ruck down a road. They had I think I got the map here. There was not like land nav involved. Like there's an aerial view. Do the blue ruck, do the green or the red ruck, do the yellow. Like you just follow the road, So the first one we had to go down is the red. They gave us a key. You had to ruck down, close to half a mile or whatever. And they had 4 ammo cans. You found your ammo can, you opened it up, and they had a magnet or binoculars. So you went back to an observation zone they had marked on it, and you looked out in a field with it, and there was a picture of a terrorist. And we had noticed at registration before we left that there was a bunch of pictures of terrorists there on the table. And doing matches like this before, we kind of thought to ourselves, that seems important. Probably ought to take a picture of that. So looking through binoculars, we figured out, we thought it was C. I don't know. We never found out if we were right or not, but we both looked through, found it. Took the binoculars back, locked them up, and then had to ruck back. So the way this worked, your pack, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, 25 pounds minimum. So that could be whatever useful weight. You just have to make sure you have 25 at the end, so don't make it all ammo. And water, whatever. So if you do the ruck in 15 minutes or under, you get the full amount of points. And I could probably tell you that here in a second. So ruck legs are worth 100 points, and it's negative 5 points for every 15 seconds over 15 minutes. So you get 100 points if you're under 15 minutes, and for every 15 seconds you're losing 5 points. So pretty simple, so do it quick, don't go too slow. We made every ruck in under 15 minutes. I think this first one took us the longest at like 13 minutes or something like that. And then the other two, we were down in like 11 and 12 minutes. I mean, they were, with the rucking me and Mike do, the fitness we're in, it was a pretty, I don't want to say easy. I mean, I was definitely huffing, and it was all on like freshly chip and dust roads. So like the heat was kind of miserable, but it was a doable distance and time. So we got back from that, and the next stage we did was shakers and movers. So 3 magazines with 8 rounds. I think they ended up just having us load 1 magazine with the full amount of them. And they had standing, kneeling, and prone. Again, paper targets. So they had 2 poppers, sheets that popped up, and then they had one on the back that moved along left to right. So they pop the targets up, you take your shots on it, at each one, and they would pop back down. So I think it was like left, right, and then center from each position. So kind of a neat format. The movers, everything was actually string or cable driven. Like they just had this eye hook in the middle with all these strings, and for your popper, someone would just pull it and it would pop up, and then I don't know if they let go or they pulled it the other way and it would pop down. And the mover was someone was just pulling string and it's moving across. So again, those different positions, it was, what's that?
I said, wow, fuck those ROs.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it was too bad. We noticed pretty early that they popped up and they moved not all that fast. So you did have a little bit more time to kind of get a good sight picture on that. So we had a pretty decent score. It was early in the day, but I think when we shot it, we were the second highest at that point. And I think the stage before that, we were second highest on points as well at that time of the day. So Mike, did you have anything to add about movers and shakers?
It was fun. The time limit felt very generous at first, just because the exposures we're used to with 3-gun movers. And so I definitely could have slowed down, and I did. It was a little strange, though, just because, again, the target presentation was not like motorized or anything in a sense. So it just was, strangely inconsistent. And I think the ROs kind of felt by the rate that we were engaging that, we'll speed it up. And that was about the time that we were like, we could be slowing down.
Yeah, it did seem to speed up a little bit as it went on.
Yeah, it was just kind of a weird dynamic. But at the same time, like, because we've shot so many movers with quick exposure, it's just like, this is kind of enjoyable here. Like, we're not in this terrible time crunch. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some good lessons and slowing down a little bit. There were certain stages and things where you couldn't afford to slow down, and we'll get into those later, but this wasn't one of them.
Yeah, the one thing that this is one of those, like, you should know, but you didn't think about it. We went up there when they went to score, and like all of our hits were a little on the low side of the targets of the A zone and the C zone and stuff. And then it kind of hits you. You're like, oh yeah, I'm really only at like 15, 20 yards here. Height over bore matters at this distance, even on a piece of paper. So, ideally I would have been shooting more like the shoulder instead of holding the center of the chest or whatever on the paper. So neat stage. I mean, shooting movers is always fun. So you guys got any questions before we move on from that? All right, we'll try to keep moving. So after this, I think, did we do the blind stage right after this, Mike? Because I think that's the next stage, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I feel that is correct.
So this was our worst stage of the weekend. And blind leading the blinds, what they called it. And really the reason for that was it's a stage, a style that we just don't do a whole lot of. So it was completely blind. So you didn't see anything till you got up there. It was kind of at the top of the hill, kind of catty corner to where we were shooting before. And you had 300 seconds. They had 6 targets hidden out there. You had each target you had to guide the RO on, and each team member had to shoot a target 3 times each. So me and Mike chose to shoot at the same target, and basically he would shoot that target 3 times once guiding the RO on, and then I was going to shoot it. I think we only got 4 of the 6 in that time. There was definitely some lessons learned, and honestly, we don't shoot a lot of completely blind. This is very much a field match type deal, and there's definitely some lessons learned. You want to share some of those, Mike, and then I'll kind of fill in whatever you don't.
Yeah, so they started you outside of essentially like a fighting position, and at the start you could go and move into it. And getting in, you were kind of bent down, and there was some camo netting with 2 holes. So there's kind of 2 positions naturally at a seated or kneeling level, and there was some jumbled up logs piled in there. And then there was a random 3-day assault pack. And so right away we start with our plan of we're going to try to locate the targets, and then verify with the RO that target is in play, and then I'll engage, or if Ryan found it first, he would engage it, and then that's also going to help your second shooter engage it as well, because the first shooter will, it'll be ringing and getting impact. And so there was quite a few pieces of steel out there that weren't in play. So we found one and started ringing. The log that we were behind was positioned just right where I could kind of sit and get in kind of a somewhat decent position, and then running the 16-inch rifle, the forend could be on the log. So I was able to kind of get tucked in and get pretty steady, and my splits, even on those targets that were probably maybe 8 inches wide by maybe 12 inches tall, kind of hard to tell because they were out there probably 200 yards.
Yeah, 200 to 300.
Yeah, and there was one that we didn't see that would have probably been about probably 125, 150, but we found 4 of them. I was able to engage and then get pretty good splits because of the position I was in. About then, I was starting to get some mirage off my suppressor. I should have ran a cover on it for that match. I had not been running a cover just because running VTAC boards and stuff, I don't want any more width on it than I have to. And then I've also gotten to the point where I kind of like QDing it on and off depending on what I'm doing. And so I didn't run a cover, but it would have been a really good match to run a cover because that mirage started really impeding the hunting. What I kind of found out was because of the matches that we shoot, and there's generally some pretty identifiable shooting positions, I assume that those ports in the camo net were there for a safety reason. Hey, we put you in here. This controls your cone of fire. Because you were shooting off of one side of this valley, and then down and to your left was another area where people were shooting and walking. So, and then there's some roadways and stuff out there. So, yeah, I was kind of under the impression and didn't clarify it well that those ports were there for a reason and we were shooting out of them for a reason. Well, it turns out that two of the targets, the ones that we didn't find, one was farther up the hill than I could see. It would have been obscured from my port by trees. I would have needed to move to Ryan's side if I was going to see it. The other one you could not see unless you stood up. So it was kind of a, hey, I got locked into a fairly steady shooting position that I didn't want to leave, and also made the assumption that I couldn't for safety reasons, as well as obviously I was comfortable there. So there's some lessons there of, hey, not all matches are going to have some of the same things that we're used to. Another thing was that random 3-day assault pack. They said, oh yeah, you can use it, move it, check it out, whatever you want. Well, Ryan and I, we kind of ignored it. I don't think Ryan even, we touched it towards the end. And so who knows? We could have used that to help Ryan get a little bit more steady, because I think he was struggling to get in a good steady position with his shorter handguard. Or who knows? Maybe there was intel about where those targets were. Maybe there was a range card in there or something. So shame on us for not doing a better job of kind of allowing our past experiences to govern and rule our present. So that was just kind of my thoughts on that. So one target was up on a hillside, probably stretching out towards 450. You could only see it from the right position that Ryan occupied. And then the other one was down below us at about maybe 125 to 150 yards, and you could not see it unless you stood up. And so, yep, those were the two that we didn't see and engage. I was fortunate that I was able to make contact with all my impacts on the targets that I found, but we didn't do a great job of working Ryan into the position he needed to make those hits. So, yeah, Ryan, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely shot like garbage on that. That was my worst shooting of the day. And yeah, I think in retrospect, I probably would have, the better route would have been to come into position, stay standing, and try to identify all 6 targets first, and then start shooting, instead of just getting to shooting right away and not being able to see everything. Now, eating up time missing didn't, on my part, did not help. And then, as you know, mentioned, I started having mirage issues with my can, which really just made shooting and hitting anything and seeing other targets difficult, on top of me already shooting like hot garbage. So, I think there's a couple things we could have done better. I should have got in a better position right off the bat, instead of trying to fight through not being very steady and thinking I could make it work. So, guess you guys got any questions? Like I said, that's just not a stage we shoot a lot, and our inexperience came out on that. It's just different. So, should certainly like to practice more of that.
So I guess my question, to be clear, 5 full minutes. You had 5 full minutes on that, right?
Yes.
So even that's one of those things we don't really talk about ever. Like par times, we always, in 3-gun, 180 seconds usually. Tiger's stages, and you say, oh, that's 3 full minutes. I got all day here. 5 minutes seems like the world, but
it
time
does,
goes
and
fast.
It goes quick.
But then also, how do you use those 5 minutes? Do you spend 5 minutes, really getting settled in? Do you, what do you do with your time? And so it's tricky.
So you have 5 minutes and 24 rounds of ammo. So realistically, you don't want to just get in and blaze. And we didn't, it wasn't that we were, I did run dry towards the end because I didn't shoot very well. So, and that was for the reasons stated earlier. But you're right, 5 minutes goes quicker than you would like. So, anything from our other color commentator before we move on?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing here, and this is the perfect time to drop this, is that your past experiences as competition shooters across a relatively wide range of competition shooting would have gotten you killed in the streets on this stage because you never experienced it, right? Like that's what I'm hearing here, and that should be reassuring to anyone who may be new and listening to this. If you've listened to us at this point for 55 minutes on this AAR, again, thank you, as Mark always says, thank you for hanging with us for this long. But like, you and Mike are experienced competition shooters. You've done classes, you've done all this training, but you were at this point given a situation you weren't used to, and you struggled a little bit. And that should be reassuring to new shooters, because you're going to be presented with situations you're not used to, and you're going to struggle, but everyone does.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, sometimes you get a new situation, you're like, hey, I can deal with this. And then other times, and it, we still looking at the scores, talking to them, it was a mid-pack finish. The rest of the day we shot very well. So we didn't but yeah, I mean, it was definitely, there's always lessons to be learned. You get that situation and it's just like, all right, well, here's what I need to learn and move on with it. So yeah, that's
like Mike said, he got comfortable in a shooting position, and he's not used to a match format where you need to move out of a shooting position that's very well established for you. You have a port, you have logs, you have this, you have that. You get behind that, you're like, okay, I can see everything's going to be there. That wasn't the case in this stage, and that's something that like new shooters need to understand. They're not always going to see all of the angles that maybe, like, I don't know, Jerry Mikulek would see, or whoever their favorite Instagram hero is, right? Like,
yeah. I may talk to someone that does more of that and find out like what their strategy is, because that's definitely something I'd like to learn more about. So just to keep us going. So we finished that. We had our second ruck of the day. In this case, we went down there. They said, hey, you're going to do the yellow ruck. Go down the yellow path. There's going to be a sign. Read what's on the sign and come back. So said, okay. So did that, got there. It was just, I probably still have it on my phone. It was just something about like cone of fire or some kind of military jargon. I just took a picture of it. So when we came back, they're like, hey, what'd it say? Get the phone out, read what it says. There's your 100 points. After that, let me see where we're at. Did we do log ropers next, Mike? Because I think that's...
Sounds right.
Yep, so we did the stage called log ropers. This was our only real weight. Like everything else we pretty much walked up to. But, so 5 magazines of 5 rounds for a total of 25. Before you shot it, you held you had 60 seconds on PT. So they had these sycamore logs that each partner picked up an end, and you had to hold it about chest height. Couldn't balance it on your head, just had to kind of hold out in front of you for 60 seconds. So 60 seconds is done. You drop it. You could get a magazine even in your hand ready. Your guns were laying up next to a couple barricades, and each barricade had numbers. And they had some paper targets out at about 100 yards. And in this case, the paper targets had T-shirts on them. So similar, you get 30 seconds. Once they say go, you run up there, pick up your rifle, load it. You've got to get 5 rounds on it. Drop your mag, 5 rounds from your second position. So like in my case, I was left side. I had to shoot off the left side. And again, you have to maintain cover. So you can't stick way outside, shoot with your right shoulder. You've pretty much got to shoot left shouldered to keep, behind the cover of it. So 5, then move to another position, 5. And you did that 3 times. The last position, you were each prone. And for a very unique twist, you that last position, you picked one arm, and they took your other arm down by your waist and took a strap and strapped that to your waist. So in that case, you had to go running up, pull your magazine out. I use my right hand, and then I had to shoot those 5 rounds or whatever it was with just my gun in my right hand. And I was shooting prone on the left side of the barricade in that case. And then Mike was prone on the other side with one hand. So that was, I think, the first time I've ever had to shoot rifle prone with just one hand, like on the belly, trying to rest on the mag and then get hits within 30 seconds on a IPSC at 100 yards with a t-shirt. So very, very challenging stage. I know one of them, that first one where I had to switch from left to right, it took too long to get set up in that left position. I actually dropped a couple shots shy of getting my 5 in on the right side. But we'll let Mike kind of discuss what he thought of this stage here. But I will say this was a good lesson in this stage because, like, scoring it, I didn't have all my hits, but the hits that I had were good, like more A-zone hits than everything else. And it was definitely a good lesson of like, all right to go fast, but you can't just go fast and just spray bullets. 3 hits in the A-zone is better than 5 hits just sprayed all around the D-zone. So, Mike, what did you think of that stage? You have any takeaways?
You're muted, Mike.
Sorry about that again. I'm not normally the guy that mutes in between, but I'm trying to tonight because the guys are upset with me screwing with guns. So, I like that stage. I really enjoyed it. The whole time that we were holding the sycamore log, I got to annoy the crap out of Dixon by yelling Goggins quotes. And we all know
he's yelling, "Who's going to carry the log?"
Yep. And stay
Fucking
hard.
Goggins.
Yep, and all those other fun catchphrases. So I was making sure that Ryan enjoyed every second of the log carry. So the side that I shot from had actual horizontal port. It was about 2 inches wide, like a VTAC. So that was really cool that they had the shirts on because it made me really need to pause and make sure that, hey, I'm shooting 100 yards. I've got the gun rolled over 90 degrees. I need to make sure I'm holding in such a way that the rounds are going where they need to go. So this was a fantastic stage because you need to understand your cadence. You need to come in and shoot a quick enough cadence that you're delivering accurate fire, but you would not run yourself out of time. Because agreed, it's better to deliver 3, A-zone impacts than it is to deliver, 5 where it's only 1 point each. But at the same time, like, you need to get in, get comfortable with where that reticle's settling, and then take that shot as soon as it's settled. And because if you over aim and you break that shot and it's still not exactly where it needs to be, well, what was the odds that you could have fired 1, 2, or 3 shots that were just as accurate, shooting a comfortable cadence, shooting your sights? So, yep, that was a good one. It was a good thing for Ryan and I to have some of the emergency reloads because we normally shoot matches where we can plan out the emergency reloads, and that's kind of an earmark of an experienced running gunner or 3-gunner, is if they can keep that gun from going to slide lock or bolt lock. and that's ammo management on stages, between stages. And this time they're like, nope, you need to prove that you can do this. It's also a thing that you need to understand your gear's limitations. Fortunately, the blessing and curse was these down count or down loaded magazines that we were starting with meant that we showed up with loaded mags that we have to unload because we had a bunch of full 30 rounders. Well, metal mags are not the most fun to download compared to a PMag, but once they were downloaded, the metal mags drop free very well out of my LMT lower versus the PMag Gen 3s generally do. Lancers seem like they always do, and Gen 2 PMags, nah, I have to strip them out. So it was one of those things where, hey, having magazines that would drop free were really important to get that emergency reload done on time. But yeah, fun stage. Love teasing the crap out of Brian about Goggins, and the shirts over the target. It's always a nice thing to make you pause.
Yeah,
You guys were running your bad letter. You guys had your bad levers too, though, so you were quicker
our
on
ND levers.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Mike said he's got his Mars, so the Mars you don't need that, and
the Mars you don't need. Like, I don't know why he's worried about the 10th of a second to strip a mag out. Fucking gamer, man.
So yeah, that was a fun stage. So after that, we did our last ruck. Again, it was run up the road a little bit. There was a piece of paper, take a picture, come back, tell them what it said. That was one of our fastest. Actually, our strategy, I should explain this. Our strategy for the ruck was hustle, like haul ass in the very beginning. Get there, get to whatever we needed. We'd start, me or Mike would start a stopwatch when they told us to go. And then we would just manage time from there. So if we got there in 5 minutes, that's the halfway point. We're coming back. Well, sometimes, downhill, we're trotting a little, but like the last two, we ended up walking in because, we're getting back. We can see the checkpoint and it's at the 10-minute mark or whatever. It's like, well, you might as well walk in. There's no bonus points for like sprinting the whole thing, wearing yourself out. So, ideally we would have done it in 14 minutes every time, 14:30, just really use that full time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But they were close enough. Like I said, I think they were all enough under a mile that like 12, 13 minutes, we weren't dying. So, so that was good. Then we had the last stage of the day, hot retreat. This one was a lot of fun. And I think one of our best stages of the day, mostly because of Mike in this case. The whole rest of the day, like we would finish these stages and like we didn't think we were doing real well just because there was more down points than we were like. We were thinking we should shoot more. But it seemed like a common thing. Like we'd look at the scores and we would be like the second highest and usually way above other people and like only a point or two off the high. So like we were up to this point, we were shooting pretty good except for that blind stage. So this last stage was kind of in a lot of ways right up our alley from other team matches. So you started off in so you had one magazine with 9 rounds and then as many full magazines as you needed. We had heard coming up to this and reading the stage brief, there was a Texas Star and a spinner. So this was actually the only stage that I used my 77 grainers. So you actually started off with your 9-round mag, and they put both of you in the passenger side of an SUV, one in the front, one in the back. And this was, I think, one of the better things I've ever seen, smarter things I've seen a match director do. So instead of just driving this as like a Ford Escape or something, instead of driving it like you would normally see at a match, and I don't know, maybe it drove, maybe it didn't, they actually used like a small John Deere tractor with like a end loader or something on the front of it, and they pushed it around. They had someone steering it, but they just pushed you around and they were saying, okay, here we're starting. And then the guy in the John Deere tractor would just put it in gear and we were going at John Deere speed. Like it was steady. Anyone's driven a tractor. Once you put them in gear, put the throttle wherever it's at, it just goes. Like you're not messing with the throttle, you're not stepping on the gas or brake, you're just going. So they had, to your right, they had a bunch of paper targets, again, still scored because everything in this paper scored. And then they had bigger cardboard blocking it. So you really had a pretty narrow window where it became visible. You'd shoot 3 rounds at it or whatever, and then move on to the next one. So you shot all 3 of those targets. They stopped it. You got out, showed them that you were clear, could stow that magazine. And then from there, you had maybe 90 seconds. Yeah, 90 seconds. You ran over to a mulch or a gravel pile, and within 90 seconds, you had to shoot all the Texas Star plates off and then get the spinner to spin, working as a team. And I think they 100 yards, 125 yards, something like that. We saw the team in front of us. They finished at like 89 seconds or something like that. And they had told us that was only the second team of the day to actually complete that whole stage. So they beeped us. We went over there, started getting into position. Mike shot definitely better than me on this stage, but the Texas Star was cleared no time. I think he shot like 3 or 4 plates and I shot 1 or 2. Got onto the spinner. Took a little bit for me to get on that. Mike did more of the work here, but we ended up completing the whole stage in like 46 seconds or something like that. I mean, it was like the ROs were, I think we kind of surprised some people because that was easily the best run of the day if the other teams are barely completing it or whatever. And then when we went to score, again, we're looking at it, we're like, oh, this is not good. And they're like, no, that's a great score, whatever amount on paper. So that, from what I understood, that was a stage win for us on that one. And there was only one team after us that was going to shoot it. So, maybe they beat us and we got a second, but we felt like we really, hooked up and crushed that stage. Mostly Mike in this case, but I did my part through the rest of the day. Mike, you got any thoughts on that?
That was a really fun one to crush. We are pretty fortunate that we're pretty experienced with some of those prop targets, but at the same time, we also know that things can go terribly sideways with those targets as well, especially spinners. So yeah, I was able to get locked into a position, and I was going to shoot the top, and Ryan was going to shoot the bottom, and it was far enough out there. It was probably pushing 150 yards, so it was probably the biggest lead or ambush time that I've had to give to one of those in terms of mentally saying execute the shot before the target's actually where it needs to be, because you got the cycle of executing the shot mentally, physically carrying it out, the round actually impacting. So I'm pretty sure I only dropped 1, maybe 2 rounds, and I just tucked it into a gravel pile with the bipod sitting just right. That the recoil was taking me just to the left of the plate, maybe a foot. So even when there wasn't a whole lot of impacts on the bottom plate, it was worth continuing to shoot that small upper plate just because I was pretty locked into it. And so that's another example of, just because you think that, hey, this target down there might be better. Well, what if I took the time to shift to shoot that bigger target and then I wasn't as steady and I was, searching all over for it, or that position changed my breathing and I saw the heart rate in my optic or whatever. But yeah, that was a really fun stage, and a great example of a lot of targets like that. It's fun to hit them with a high energy round like Grendel or 308 or Creedmoor, but at the same time, timing and accuracy trumps not connecting with a bigger gun. So Yep, good stage.
Yep.
It was nice having Ryan there for moral support.
Yeah, and honestly, like the distance, and it was in some woods, like even off the clock. And I don't, maybe I'm getting old and I need to have my eyes checked. I was having trouble even with my scope, like seeing where it was. So once we finished the first target, Mike was on it and shooting at it quicker than I had found where that bottom plate was. So like I got a handful of shots on there, and I mean throughout the